France is on the verge of asking IMF for help. It is no longer Africa asking IMF for help, but France is on the verge, almost close to asking IMF for help. Honestly speaking, France is in trouble, lovely people. And I said this countless times that we are going to actually get here where France's economy will be crashing. Just imagine this powerful country like France, the home of fashion and fine food, the button that controls some of the African nations, is now facing the risk of asking the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, for help. I'm not making this up, lovely people. I'm not making this up. France's own finance minister has confirmed this, that it is possible that their last option might be to go for the IMF. So they are on the risk of asking IMF for help. So lovely people, how did it get this bad? What is happening to France? Let's talk about it. Let's first of all talk about the big problem that France is facing, and then we move to how Africa and France relationship is reshaping the economy of France and digging some holes. Or let me say, France and Africa's relationship is now creating a very serious space in France's economy, because that aspect of the conversation, they are trying to ignore it. They don't want to admit that, their relation with Africa, how some of the African nations are pulling back, is affecting the economy. They don't want to admit that, but here we are going to talk about that. And then from there, I show you how IMF deal with Africa compared to Europe. The double standard. We are going to put all that out right now. So please, I urge you to like the video and also subscribe to be part of the family. Make sure you put us on notification, all right? Respect. Now, let's talk about the big problem that France is in right now. France is drowning in debt. The country France owes about 3.3 trillion euro. And that, lovely people, is more than the size of the entire economy of France. The finance minister of France, Eric Lambeau, has admitted that yes, there is a chance that we may, I quote him, he said, yes, there's a chance we may need the IMF. This is shocking because France has never asked the IMF for help before. This is the first time France is on the verge of asking IMF for help. But lovely people, this is not just all. The government itself is in crisis right now. The politics of France itself is in a very big mess. The Prime Minister of France, whose name is François Bayrou, he is losing support. He tried his best to cut spending, but the opposition parties are solidly against him. And this is normal to cut spending, because if your earning is higher, then you spend higher. But when it becomes lower, you lower your spending, all right? But the opposition parties are against him. And on September 8th, there will be a confidence vote, and many people believe that he's going to lose. And do you know why this is scary? It is because the last prime minister, whose name is Michel Barnier, was already kicked out just months ago. So if Bayrou also falls, that means two governments gone in 1 year. And the big problem surrounding this is that when government keep collapsing, it becomes harder to fix the economy. There is another problem also, lovely people. The world right now doesn't trust France's finance right now. Investors are asking for higher interest rate before lending money to France, because France's 30-year borrowing cost now hit the highest level in 14 years. Now, for us to make this easier to understand, think of it like this. If your friends always borrow money from you and doesn't pay back quickly, next time you will charge them higher interest. That is what is happening to France. The other problem that France is facing right now, which is much more dangerous, is the reaction of the market. Because all this chaos, the French stock market is falling. Bank shares are dropping heavily because banks hold a lot of French debt. The Paris stock index, the CAC 40, went down for 2 days in a row, according to report. This shows how connected everything is. And in simple terms, for us to understand how the financial system works, this is how it goes. The government debt affects banks, banks affect the stock market, and the stock market affects the ordinary people. What is going to happen if France doesn't fix things? On 8th September, when the confidence vote will be held, if Bayrou loses, there's going to be, or there could be, a new prime minister or even a new election. But the truth is the debt won't go away. So the IMF may step in if things get worse than what it is right now. And that is going to be very embarrassing for a country like France, which is one of the strongest economy in Europe. France is the second biggest economy in the European Union. That is a fact. But that is their business, by the way. The point in all this is that France is standing at the dangerous crossroad. Now, this is where Africa comes in. Here is the particular part that many people are ignoring in the conversation. For decades, Francophone Africa countries have been or has been helping France's economy survive. I know somebody will be asking how. This is because of the CFA franc system. Many French-speaking Africa countries use the CFA franc. This is a currency controlled by France. These countries, according to the agreement, they must keep half of their reserve in the French treasury. This means France has had access to billions of African money for free, helping its own financial stability. The second part of it is resource feeding. France's economy feed on our resources in Africa, especially the Francophone countries. Uranium moved from Niger empower France's nuclear plant, which produces about 70% of its electricity. Gold and cotton from Burkina Faso, cocoa from Ivory Coast, and oil from Gabon and Chad flow into France. And because of the CFA France system, these resources are sold cheaply, thereby keeping Africa poor and France rich. This has been the trend for decades. The other side of the coin is the military and political control. France kept military bases in Africa to protect its economic interest. France supports leaders who stay loyal to Paris, not to their people. Once you stay loyal to Paris, France supports you. Even if the people at home dislike these leaders, France still supports them. Now, the problem in the conversation is that Africa is now fighting back. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Chad also is making changes. Senegal also is making changes. But let's talk about Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, who have said enough. They have expelled French troops. So the French troops are no longer there to protect the interests of France, because they are there protecting whatever is feeding their economy and stabilizing their economy. Now they chase them out. These countries challenge the CFA France, and they are now building new alliances with Russia, China, and others. So how the use of CFA France benefit France is no longer benefiting France in the angle of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. Things have changed. Niger has already stopped exporting uranium to France. When it comes to mining and resource draining, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso said no. So for Paris, lovely people, this is a huge blow. And without Niger's uranium, France risks higher energy costs. Without Africa's reserve, France loses billions in financial backing. And without Africa's cheap resources, French companies are suffering, or they are going to suffer. Now, think about the timing, lovely people. France is already drowning in debt. Its government may collapse again. And now, its control over Africa is slipping away. So the combination makes France weaker than it has been for decades, or in decades, if that is the right English. English is not my language, so don't judge me. I know somebody will be saying that, oh, official survivor, this is happening, and then he's trying to make it look like Africa is playing a part, or Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso is playing a part. I'm not the only one. Some analysis even say that France losing its grip on Africa is one of the reasons France's financial crisis feels so dangerous today. And for people who will be thinking that the IMF is going to play with France just as it played with Africa, no. Let me show you the double standard. And this I'm going to show you is the heart of why Africa always refer to IMF or the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank as a tool of neo-colonialism. The way the IMF treats African countries compared to European countries is very different. So let me break it down clearly. For African countries, lovely people, when African nations borrow from the IMF, the loans come with higher interest rates than what rich European countries get. African countries are often labeled as high risk, so the IMF do everything possible to charge them more. On top of that, lovely people, the IMF sometimes add what they call surcharges if the country is already in deep debt. For European countries, or let me say, when European countries have debt issue, they get much lower rates from the IMF. So the IMF treats Europe as too big to fail. So it's more generous towards Europe. Sometimes the IMF even forgive part of their debt. So the same IMF that punish Africa with high interest soften the rules for Europe. Let's talk about the condition attached to this loan. This is what Africa faces. IMF loans are never just about money. They come with strict conditions. And these conditions are called Structural Adjustment Program, SAPs. This condition hit Africa countries very hard. One of the things they do is currency devaluation. The IMF forces Africa countries to weaken their currency so that exports will look cheaper. But this rather makes import like food, fuel, and medicine very expensive for citizens. So anytime our leaders are taking money from the IMF, the citizens are going to feel the heat. In the face of IMF loan, Africa government are told to stop helping citizens with cheap fuel, bread, or farming support. Can you imagine that? Example, in Ghana and Nigeria, fuel subsidies were cut under IMF advice, making transport and food prices jump overnight. It happened in Ghana here. That is the reason why there were times in the time of Akufo-Addo in Ghana, things just went up, shoot up when they went to IMF. And I was shouting on TikTok that why is it that we go to IMF and things are becoming tough? This is the reason. And also, they asked government to load the citizens with much tax in the middle of this chaos, this hardship imposed on the citizen already. That is the reason why Kenyans say no. It was during the IMF program that the Kenyans stood up against their government that no way, they are not going to allow that nonsense, because whatever the government was trying to impose on the citizens was advised by IMF. The other dangerous side of the conversation is privatization. When you see your government selling assets and state properties, don't think it's just something happening. IMF pushes government, Africa government, to sell state companies, telecoms, banks, utilities to private investors. And guess what? These private investors are often Western companies. So this means Africa loses control over their own industries in the face of IMF loan. In the face of IMF loan, Africa government are told to cut spending on schools, hospitals, and school programs. According to them, the idea is to balance the budget, but ordinary people suffer so much while the debt still grows. But for Europe, this is where the double standard comes in. When European countries borrow money from the IMF, conditions are very different. The IMF doesn't tell European countries to sell their companies, their power companies, banks, and telecoms. Only Africa. The IMF rather work with them more gently to protect their people and their political stability. Not like that with Africa. So basically, in the face of IMF loan, Africa get punished. Higher interest rate, heavy conditions, and painful reform that hurt ordinary people in Africa. While on the other hand, Europe get protection, lower interest, lighter condition, and in some cases, debt relief. But the thing is, why is this happening? This is happening because the IMF is controlled by Western powers. The US and Europe have the largest voting power. Africa have very little to say. That means the main job of the IMF is to protect Western companies first, while Africa is rather treated as a borrower that must be strictly controlled. So it is not really about helping Africa grow, but about making sure that Africa pay its debt, that is according to them. And this is punishment to us. So even if France is going to go to IMF or will be going to IMF, the conditions are going to be a little bit favorable to France. But at the same time, we cannot deny the fact, or France cannot deny the fact, that it is a big embarrassment for them to go to IMF. So this is what we don't know, whether France will be able to fix things and get the economy back on track or not. This should tell you the reason why France will not like other African countries to liberate themselves from the colonial shackle, because more African countries withdrawing means more chaos for the economy. I won't go all over that. So lovely people, this is what is happening to France. More stories are coming out, and I'm going to follow up to make sure that I keep you updated as usual. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, and also put us on notification. And don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comment. Respect.